My daughter asked me to transfer her custody to her stepfather because he's richer. So I don't really post much about my personal life, but this has been weighing on me for a while now, and I guess I just need to get it all out. My name's Ethan. I'm 43 now, living in Denver with my wife, Natalie, our two girls, Chloe and Emily, and our very spoiled golden retriever named Max. Life's good these days, but it wasn't always like that. Actually, it was pretty rough for a while, and it all started about 10 years ago after my divorce from my ex-wife, Vanessa. Vanessa and I were high school sweethearts. We got married young, had our daughter, Sophia, when I was 25, and for a while, things were okay. But you know how it goes. People change, and we weren't exactly on the same page about, well, anything. She wanted to chase her passions and figure out her purpose, while I was working 60-hour weeks as a project manager to keep a roof over our heads. Long story short, we grew apart. She filed for divorce when Sophia was 7, and just like that, our family was split in two. The custody agreement gave us joint custody, but since Vanessa wasn't working and didn't exactly have the most stable situation, Sophia ended up spending most of her time with me. I didn't mind, though. Honestly, those weekends and school nights with her were the best part of my week. She was this bright, curious kid who loved art and had this unstoppable imagination. We'd spend hours drawing together at the kitchen table or building elaborate Lego worlds. She called me her partner in crime, and I honestly thought we had something unbreakable. But then Richard entered the picture. Vanessa met Richard at some work event. She eventually found a job in marketing, and from what I could tell, he checked all the boxes she wanted in a guy: successful, charming, and most importantly, loaded. I mean, this guy had a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine, a Tesla in the driveway, and he took them on these ridiculous vacations to places like the Maldives. I'm not gonna lie, it stung. Not because I wanted Vanessa back. I was over that, but because Sophia started looking at Richard like he was some kind of hero. At first, it was small things. She'd come back from her weekends with Vanessa talking about how Richard bought her a new iPad or took her to Disneyland. I'd remind her that we couldn't do stuff like that because, well, I didn't have a Richard-sized bank account. She'd nod and say she understood, but over time, I could feel her slipping away. I can't even tell you when it really started, but by the time she was 12, the excuses began. Sorry, Dad, I can't come over this weekend. I have a school project. Or, Richard's taking me to this concert. Maybe next time? Next time turned into next month, and then months turned into barely seeing her at all. The worst part? I could tell she liked being with them more. And how could I compete? They had the big house, the vacations, the shiny new everything. All I had was a 2-bedroom apartment and a job that barely left me time to breathe. I tried to talk to her about it once, ask her if something was wrong, but she just shrugged and said, "It's not that, Dad. I don't know. Things are easier over there." Easier. That word stuck with me. Anyway, the real blow came when she was 14. She sat me down one Sunday afternoon, looking all serious, and said, "Dad, I think you should let Richard adopt me." I don't think I've ever felt my heart drop like that. I remember just staring at her, completely speechless. Like, I knew things had been strained between us for a while, but I never thought it would come to this. "Adopt you?" I finally managed to say. "Sophia, what are you talking about?" She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, avoiding eye contact. "It's just, Richard's been there for me, you know? And with Mom and him, it feels like a real family. I think it would just make things easier for everyone." There was that word again. Easier. I tried to stay calm, but my voice cracked anyway. "Sophia, I'm your dad. I've always been your dad. You don't just replace me because things are easier somewhere else." She looked up at me then, and for a second, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes. But it disappeared as quickly as it came. "It's not like that, Dad. I'm not trying to replace you. I think this makes sense. Richard can give me things you can't." That hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to yell, to tell her how unfair and cruel that was, but I didn't. I couldn't. I just sat there, stunned, as she kept talking about how Richard could pay for college, how he could give her the kind of life she wanted. I tried to reason with her. I reminded her of all the nights we stayed up late watching movies, all the art projects we worked on together, all the moments that made us, well, us. But it didn't matter. She'd already made up her mind. And the worst part? She didn't even seem sad about it. After she left that day, I spiraled. I mean, how do you even process something like that? Your own kid, the person you love more than anything in the world, telling you that you're not enough. I felt like a failure, like I'd somehow screwed up so badly that my own daughter didn't want me in her life anymore. Vanessa didn't make things any easier. When I called her to talk about it, she brushed it off like it was no big deal. "Ethan, she's a teenager," she said, like that explained everything. "She's just trying to figure out what she wants. Don't take it so personally." Don't take it personally? Are you kidding me? But what could I do? I didn't have the money to fight it in court, and Sophia was so adamant about it that I felt like I had no choice. So, after weeks of sleepless nights and second-guessing myself, I signed the papers. I gave up my parental rights and let Richard adopt her. The day it became official, I sat in my car outside the courthouse and cried. Not the quiet, dignified kind of crying you see in movies. It was the ugly, gasping for air kind of crying that leaves you feeling hollow and exhausted. After that, I tried to move on. I really did, but it was like a part of me had been ripped away. I'd see dads with their kids at the park or in line at the grocery store, and it would hit me all over again. That used to be me. That used to be us. It took me a long time to pull myself out of that hole. I started going to therapy, which honestly helped more than I expected. My therapist, Karen, was the one who finally got me to see that I needed to stop blaming myself for what happened. "You did the best you could with what you had," she told me during one of our sessions. "But you can't control other people's choices, even your daughter's." I didn't believe her at first, but over time I started to. I threw myself into work, moved to a new city, and tried to find a fresh start. And then a couple of years later, I met Natalie. She was everything I didn't know I needed. Kind, funny, and so patient with all the baggage I was dragging behind me. She had a daughter, Emily, from her first marriage, and we clicked right away. Being a stepdad was different, but in a good way. And when Natalie and I had Chloe, it felt like I'd been given a second chance at being a dad. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. I had a family again, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally moving forward. But then, out of nowhere, Sophia came back. It happened on a random Tuesday evening. I was sitting in the living room, helping Emily with her math homework, while Natalie was getting Chloe ready for bed. Max was sprawled out on the rug, snoring like the lazy dog he is. It was just a regular, quiet night until my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and froze. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi, Dad. It's Sophia. Can we talk?" I swear my heart stopped for a second. I reread the message 3 or 4 times, trying to process it. Sophia? After 10 years of silence? What the hell was I supposed to do with this? I didn't respond right away. I just sat there, staring at my phone, while Emily asked me why I looked like I'd seen a ghost. Natalie came into the room and must have noticed my expression, because she asked if everything was okay. I showed her the text, and she raised an eyebrow. "Are you going to call her?" "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wanted to pick up the phone right then and there, but the other part, the part that still remembered the way she'd walked out of my life without a second thought, was screaming at me to leave it alone. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I texted back, "Hey, Sophia, what's going on?" She replied almost immediately, "Can I come over? I really need to talk to you." I didn't know what to say. I mean, what could she possibly want after all this time? But I told her she could come by the next day, mostly because I couldn't think of a good reason to say no. When she showed up, I barely recognized her. She was taller, of course, and her once bright personality seemed muted, like life had worn her down. She looked tired, older than her 24 years, and as soon as she stepped inside, I could tell something was wrong. "Dad," she said, her voice shaky. "I'm sorry for just showing up like this, but I didn't know where else to go." I folded my arms, trying to keep my emotions in check. "What's going on, Sophia?" She hesitated, like she was trying to figure out how much to tell me. Then, it all came out in a rush. Richard had kicked her out. Apparently, they'd had some kind of falling out after she dropped out of college, and he decided he wasn't going to support her anymore. She'd been sleeping on friends' couches for the past few weeks, but she said that wasn't sustainable. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she said, looking up at me with those big, pleading eyes she used to give me as a kid. "Can I stay here for a while? Just until I get back on my feet?" I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. I didn't know how to feel. Angry, hurt, sad, maybe all three. 10 years. She'd been gone for 10 years, And now she was standing in my living room, asking for my help like nothing had happened. "I don't know, Sophia," I said finally, my voice colder than I intended. "It's been a long time. You made it pretty clear back then that you didn't want me in your life." She flinched, and for a moment I almost felt bad. But then I remembered all the nights I stayed awake, wondering what I'd done wrong, all the birthdays and holidays that went by without so much as a phone call. "I didn't mean for things to turn out this way," she said softly. "I was a kid, Dad. I didn't know what I was doing." "That's not an excuse," I shot back, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "You were old enough to know what you were doing when you pushed me out of your life. And now, because things didn't work out with Richard, you think you can just come back and pretend like none of that happened?" "I didn't know where else to go," she repeated, her voice breaking. Natalie, who had been quietly standing in the doorway, stepped into the room then. "Ethan," she said gently, placing a hand on my arm, "maybe we should all take a breath and sit down." But I couldn't. I was too worked up. "Sophia, if you're here because you genuinely want to fix things between us, that's one thing. But if you're just looking for a place to crash..." I trailed off, shaking my head. She didn't say anything, which honestly said more than words ever could. Sophia didn't stay long that night. After I laid it all out, there wasn't much else to say. She sat there in silence for a while, her hands twisting the strap of her bag, before finally standing up and saying, "I get it. I'll figure something out." I didn't stop her. As much as it hurt to see my daughter like that, lost, vulnerable, I knew I couldn't be the one to save her. Not anymore. She'd made her choices, and as much as I hated it, she was going to have to live with the consequences. After she left, Natalie and I sat in the living room for a long time without saying anything. Finally, she broke the silence. "That couldn't have been easy for you." "It wasn't," I admitted, rubbing my hands over my face. "But what am I supposed to do? She's not my responsibility anymore. I'm not her dad, at least not legally. I gave up that right when I signed those papers." Natalie nodded, but she looked thoughtful. "Still, it's okay to feel conflicted. She's your daughter, no matter what those papers say." "Maybe," I said, leaning back against the couch. "But that doesn't mean I can fix her life for her. Not after everything that's happened." Over the next few weeks, Sophia tried reaching out a few more times, mostly through my mom, Margaret. She'd call her, crying about how hard things were, about how she was struggling to find work or a stable place to live. At one point, Margaret called me, clearly torn, and said, "Ethan, she's your daughter. Don't you think you should help her?" "No, Mom," I said firmly. "She's not a kid anymore. She's 24. She made her choices, and now she has to deal with them. I can't keep letting her back into my life, only for her to leave again when it's convenient." Margaret sighed, but she didn't push me on it after that. I think she understood, even if she didn't completely agree. Part of me wanted to believe Sophia's intentions were genuine, that she really did want to rebuild our relationship. But the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that she was only reaching out because she had nowhere else to turn. It wasn't about me. It was about what I could do for her. And that realization, it stung. Still, I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt every time I thought about her. I'd wonder if I was being too harsh, if I was failing her all over again by not stepping in. But then I'd remind myself, she wasn't the little girl who used to call me her partner in crime anymore. She was an adult, and as much as it killed me, this was something she had to figure out on her own. One day, Margaret called me again, sounding more concerned than usual. "Sophia's been asking to borrow money," she said. "She says she needs it for rent, but, Ethan, do you think she's telling the truth?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know, Mom. And honestly, I'm not sure it matters. I can't get dragged into this. I've worked too hard to rebuild my life, and I'm not going to let her pull me back into that mess." Margaret was quiet for a moment before finally saying, "I just wish things were different." "Yeah," I said softly. "Me too. The truth is I still love Sophia. I probably always would. But love doesn't mean letting someone walk all over you. It doesn't mean sacrificing your own peace and stability for someone who only comes around when they need something." I contacted a lawyer to see if there was any way to protect myself legally, just in case. I didn't want Sophia coming after me for financial support or trying to drag me into her problems. It felt cold, even cruel, But it was the only way I could protect the life I'd built with Natalie, Emily, and Chloe. The lawyer assured me that since I'd relinquished my parental rights all those years ago, I wasn't obligated to provide anything for Sophia. Not money, not a place to stay, nothing. Hearing that should have been a relief, but it just left me feeling empty. Sophia stopped reaching out after that. I don't know where she is now or what she's doing. Part of me hopes she's figured things out, that she's found some stability and maybe even happiness. But another part of me knows she's probably still struggling. And that's the hardest part, knowing there's nothing I can do to change it. I don't know if Sophia will ever come back into my life again. And if she does, I don't know if I'll be able to let her in. But for now, I'm focusing on the family I have, the family that's here, that loves me, and that I love with all my heart.